Okay, I'm going to get started in just a moment where it looks like most people are in. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us this evening for Medical Cannabis Prescribing for GPs, hosted by Drug Science. I'm Mags, I'm head of Project 2021, and I'll be your host this evening. We've got an amazing lineup of experts in medical cannabis prescribing and GP prescribing specifically for you this evening. For the Q&A part of the evening, I'll start off with my own questions and then turn to audience questions after that, just so that everyone's aware of how it will work. I want to say a huge thank you to the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society and the Primary Care Cannabis Network, who have helped make tonight's CPD accredited event possible. The schedule this evening will run like this. We'll have 3 talks back to back, then we'll have a short 5-minute break, followed by 2 more talks and the Q&A at the end. I would also like to say at this point that any doctors and nurses interested in prescribing, please do send an email to prescribers@drugscience.org.uk and we can have a chat about that. And I'll share that again towards the end of the webinar tonight. So before we get started properly, I'm just going to quickly share a poll, which will pop up on your screen if it all works correctly. So hopefully that's on your screen now. You'll have 2 questions to answer. The first one is whether you are a GP, a nurse, specialist consultant, other medical professional, or not a medical professional at all. And the second question is, how did you find out about today's event? I'll just give about 15 more seconds to answer that, and then we'll get cracking. What have we got? We've got mostly GPs, that's good. And how much did you find out about today? Drug science comms. Okay, great, thank you. That's really good to know. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to, I was going to say hand over to someone else. No, I'm not. I'm going to share my own screen and talk to you a little bit about what I do at Drug Science. So let's try and share my screen here. So I work for Drug Science, and Drug Science is the UK's leading drug policy and research charity. We were founded in 2010 by Professor David Nutt, who you may know used to be the drugs advisor to the government. And what we advocate for is evidence-based drug policy. So not policy based on politics and commercial interests, as so much of it feels like it is at the moment. But we really stand to provide education, we publish research, we run events like this, and we also publish studies just to help change policy for the better. Medical cannabis is one of our key focuses of the organisation, the other ones being around safe drug consumption and psychedelic drug research. And a quick little bit about the history of cannabis, of the law of cannabis, for some context setting. So before 2001, cannabis was Class B. So that meant that if you were caught in possession, you could get 5 years in prison and or an unlimited fine. And if you were caught in possession with intent to supply, you could get up to 14 years in prison or an unlimited fine or both. So not good news. Then in 2001, we moved to a scheduling system, and cannabis was put in the most serious schedule alongside the likes of LSD and ecstasy. And this is where it stayed until 3 years ago. So that meant that in Schedule 1, it was deemed as having no therapeutic or medicinal value. Then in November 2018, we had the Misuse of Drugs Amendments regulations. And this meant that cannabis was moved to Schedule 2, where it could be used for medical purposes. And that's where we find ourselves today, where cannabis is now legal for medicinal purposes in the UK. And it's really, really surprising to me how few people actually seem to still know that. There's a huge awareness job still to be done in this country. So what that change in law meant was that specialist doctors, so doctors who are registered on the specialist registry, are able to prescribe, but not GPs. At the time that the legislation was passed, Sajid Javid said, having been moved by heartbreaking cases involving sick children, it was important to me that we took swift action to help those who can benefit from medical cannabis. Now, he was Home Secretary at the time that he said that, and now he is Health Secretary. And unfortunately, since he made that statement, we've only seen 3 prescriptions of whole plant medical cannabis on the NHS, and they've all been for children with rare forms of epilepsy. So back in November just gone, so just a couple of months ago, the campaigning organisation End Our Pain were actually campaigning outside of the Houses of Parliament in Westminster, and they were campaigning because it was 3 years since that legalisation of medical cannabis occurred, but they're still unable to get the medication that their children so desperately need. So you might ask, why aren't doctors prescribing medical cannabis on the NHS? Well, it's not that simple. There's a few different reasons. Firstly, there's not enough UK-based evidence on medical cannabis that will influence NICE guidelines, and there's a real preference for randomized controlled trials, which prove a real challenge for cannabis when you're talking about a plant, and for treatment for rare conditions such as the epilepsies that we see in these children. The official NHS guidelines are very restrictive, the NICE guidelines, and there needs to be an exceptional case if a child is to be prescribed medical cannabis with epilepsy. Another reason is that specialist consultants lack the education at the moment, and therefore they lack the confidence to know what to prescribe. So I'll come on in a bit to talk a little bit about what education is actually out there for doctors to tap into at the moment. Also, setting up as a prescriber is complicated. There are lots of regulations and costs involved for doctors that have to navigate that alongside their usual practice if they want to come on as a prescriber for medical cannabis. And finally, and most relevant to this event this evening, GPs aren't allowed to prescribe currently unless overseen by a specialist consultant. So that means that the specialist consultant needs to initiate the prescription, and the GP can then do the follow-up appointments with that patient. And we'll talk in a lot more detail about that with our other speakers in a bit later. So this is why we at Drug Science launched Project 2021 2 years ago. The project is the UK's largest medical cannabis real-world registry. So it's an observational trial, an observational study, sorry, not a trial. And it includes lots of multi-stakeholder partnerships. So we work with lots of industry experts and clinicians, and we listen to patient feedback. And of course, we've got the partners who actually fund the project itself and provide their products for the formulary. The publication of data occurs whether it's favourable or not, and we're really transparent with that data. We put out new figures around our patient numbers and demographics every single month in our monthly newsletters, as well as deep dive data nuggets, as we call them, into the data as well. And that's aside from actually the main papers and research that we will publish as well, which kind of get the most attention, I suppose, when it comes to our comms. So do make sure that you join our newsletters in order to keep up to date with that, and check out the Drug Science website for more details and to read those articles. Finally, the last point here is that we are aiming to get up to 20,000 patients accessing medical cannabis through the project. That's our aim, and we just want to try and keep going until we can hit that number and help as many people as we can. The people who are eligible for Project 2021 are those who have a confirmed diagnosis of an indication that is covered by any of our participating clinics. So some of the most common are chronic pain, anxiety, PTSD, and MS. But I'm sure you'll be aware, if you have looked at any other clinic websites, that there are lots of different conditions that can be covered and treated by medical cannabis. So we are now opening up the project to ensure that all of those people can be part of Project 2021. Here's some data from last month. So last month, we were really proud to surpass 2,000 patients on Project 2021. And you can see the breakdown here of how of which categories they fall into in terms of their primary condition. So the patients that we have with us are able to select a primary condition and then multiple secondary conditions as it currently stands. And chronic pain does reflect the largest cohort of patients, with anxiety coming up second. Okay. So how patients choose a clinic is they go onto the Drug Science website and they select a clinic based on their condition and on the costs involved for the consultations, so according to their own budget. And it's important to note here that clinics set their own consultation prices. Clinics also have different specialisms. So for example, 2 of the clinics on our directory at the moment are specialist pain clinics. So they will only treat pain conditions with medical cannabis. And finally, patients do choose their own clinic and contact the clinic themselves rather than Drug Science getting involved. That's all part and parcel of being an observational study. The costs involved do vary depending on your condition, depending on the clinic that you've chosen. So as I said already, the clinics set their own consultation costs, but the monthly dose as it stands of medical cannabis provided by our partners and listed on the T21 formulary are capped at £150 for a monthly dose. And that's going to be changing as of next month to move to a set price model where it will be £7 per gram and £7 per milliliter across the board for all T21 products. And I should note as well that patients can remain with T21 and still give us their data, but be prescribed off of the T21 formulary as well. Really, our objective is to try and gather as much patient data as possible with the ultimate goal of moving towards NHS funding. So patients can be prescribed flour, or they can be prescribed oil. And we're always looking at more innovative, other innovative products as well. So we look to add to our formulary in due course as well. And I'm sure 1 or 2 of our other speakers will come on to talk a little bit more in detail about what you would prescribe for each patient. That's certainly not my role. And in terms of collecting data for Project 2021, this is all done through software called SAIL, and questionnaires are sent out to patients every 3 months for completion. And this allows us to offer the set pricing, the capped pricing prescriptions to patients, because our funders, our partners, want to receive that data through from patients about their products so that they can learn and improve with that data. So 4 easy ways that you can get involved with Project 2021. First off, you can request printed materials for your GP surgery. Just drop an email to the address there. You can download and share your own posters and flyers for the project. And the link is in your takeaway document, by the way, which has been emailed to you just ahead of the conference this evening. Also, I'd really recommend signing up to our monthly Project 2021 newsletter for news on future announcements and on events as well. And finally, in terms of training, we actually have partnered up with the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society to provide bi-monthly training with Professor Mike Barnes, who is our Chief Medical Officer on the project, and also a UK renowned expert on medical cannabis. And he does face-to-face training every 2 months with clinicians, just for a donation of £99 to the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society. So I highly recommend getting involved with that if you're interested in becoming a prescriber. Also, I can announce there is a new training course available that we will be linking to in our T21 newsletter going out tomorrow, but it's sativalearning.com. This week, they have announced a new medical cannabis course, which we're very proud to have contributed to. And many of our prescribers and patients share their experiences in video content as part of this course. I've looked through it myself and it really is great. It's got some really engaging material in there. So I thoroughly recommend checking out the Sativa Learning course as well if you're interested in prescribing. And the final thing to say from me is that we developed this poster for GP practices if you should wish to put something up in your waiting room that can help advise patients around medical cannabis and tell them that they can access medical cannabis now legally in the UK through Project 2021 from Drug Science. So do just drop me a line and you'll also find that poster in your takeaway pack that's been shared with you on your email for this evening's conference as well. So I'm going to stop sharing there. As I say, if you've got any questions at all, then please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them all at the end during the Q&A section of the evening. So I've gone over a little bit there, but next up we've got Leon Barron. So Leon is a GP based in London and the founder of the Primary Cannabis Care Network. As well as continuing to undertake regular NHS work and being a visiting tutor for the undergrad medicine at UCL, he is an executive committee member of Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society and of Drug Sciences Medical Cannabis Working Group. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Leon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mags. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all, albeit virtually. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, listen, I'm going to cover really my perspective on this topic, and there might be a little bit of overlap, but where I see a slide that does overlap with others, we'll move on promptly. So Mags has basically just given a little bit about me. Day-to-day, I'm a GP. I guess I became interested in this topic in 2017. I was lucky to meet Mike Barnes and Hannah Deacon, and this was around the time that the law was about to be changed. And really, I just did my own reading and learning, and I found it fascinating that there was this subject out there that I knew nothing about, but obviously it's extremely interesting and applicable to the work that we do as GPs. This is always one ask I put up before I talk to anyone new to this subject: just take these things out of your head. Although I could say that by putting this here, I'm sort of putting these things into your head. The basic message is, this is what we've been used to in the past when we think about cannabis for some of us. So really, cannabis is a plant. It's a medicine, no different to many other medicines that we use in clinical practice. Lots of chemotherapy agents come from plants, digoxin, opioids, of course, and the cannabis plant itself really, when you get beneath the surface, has a wonderful array of interesting active compounds and cannabinoids that all have very interesting medical properties in themselves. So really, its proper medical properties have been known for a very long time, and cannabis has been used throughout all civilizations. Unfortunately, in the 1920s, really, in America, it was politicized, and unfortunately, for various political reasons, we stopped using it, which was a great shame, because it was it was used for a long time for lots of different ailments. The endocannabinoid system is something that my colleagues are going to talk about a little bit later in more detail, but essentially the reason that cannabis does work so well is that we all have a cannabis system, an endocannabinoid system, that could be modulated by this plant and these active compounds. Mags has just said a little bit about Alfie and the campaign in 2018, which ultimately led to the rescheduling of cannabis, which meant that doctors on the specialist register could initiate a script for cannabis-based medicine. The criteria was that obviously GMC specialists could do that. The NICE updated their guidance and said that GPs in theory could prescribe as part of a shared care arrangement, and that is certainly happening in some of the clinics. And I think Harrison will talk a little bit about his experiences of doing that. It's quite difficult in practice. There's lots of red tape, actually, and it can't be done in NHS practice, which is a bit of a roadblock for a lot of people, a lot of clinicians. Jersey was different, of course, and we're going to hear from Mark later, but interestingly, Jersey did allow GP prescribing, and there are now quite a few GPs in the Channel Islands, it's not just Jersey, and who are prescribing for their patients. It's worth noting that cannabis is legal in over 50 countries now across the world, and most of the prescribing, if not, I'd say about 95% of the prescribing, is coming through GPs for lots of reasons that we'll explore later. And GPs are prescribing for lots of different conditions, most notably things like chronic pain and mood disorders. Palliative care, of course, is very much a GP role, cancer, pain, neurological disease. And even now, long COVID, there's interesting studies that cannabis is in fact very useful, could be a very useful tool for long COVID. So the situation in the UK is interesting. what's really, I think the legislation has led to a rapid increase in the number of private clinics that have appeared. This private clinic model is quite unique to the UK. In fact, we don't see it elsewhere. And essentially, a lot of these clinics are really just about medical cannabis. And that's meant that we've sort of ended up with this two-tiered system, where if you can afford a script for medical cannabis, and you fit the criteria, then you're eligible for treatment. There's an interesting statistic that's often quoted in these circles, and that's there's potentially around 1.4 million people who are just using cannabis for medical purposes in the UK. So these potentially are a large number of people that may benefit from cannabis on prescription. As Mags has mentioned, a lot of the conditions that we see being prescribed for are what I would deem as bread and butter GP work, really, chronic pain, mood disorders. And the lack of scripts is, again, it's complicated. It's not a single answer for this, but the few things that I think about are the unlicensed nature of the medicine. It's a Schedule 2 drug. It's unlicensed. So there's more responsibility, more bureaucracy with that. The doctors are taking somewhat more of a risk by prescribing off-license, unlicensed specials. I think, obviously, the guidelines are key to this, and the lack of GP approval to initiate scripts. And I think sometimes there's this sort of attitude that perhaps patients sometimes know better, or they're telling their doctors that this might work for them, or that it's working already for them if they're using illicit street cannabis. And I think there's also sort of deep set attitudes that a lot of clinicians have around cannabis, the plant, and the stigma. Lots of us have had first-hand experience of managing psychosis, and often seen the detrimental effects of cannabis. Often many of us haven't learned anything about this at medical school or in our postgraduate training. And then, we still have these ongoing headlines that don't particularly add. Obviously, this is more around recreational use recently, but this kind of this narrative is not particularly helpful in the medical space, where we really have to differentiate between the high strength THC that people might use for recreational use and the medical conversation. This is kind of an interesting statistic, and I did this, in fact, a couple of hours before putting this talk together for this evening. If you type in medical cannabis into PubMed, you can just see the uptake in research over the last 20-30 years. It's phenomenal. This is a real science. This is real medicine, and the number of studies is just growing year on year. So it's a huge area for development, and I think we're really just at the beginning of understanding the potential of this plant and its application to for our patients' needs. I'm going to talk a bit now about the PCCN, the Primary Care Cannabis Network, which I set up myself about 3 years ago. This was really just because I felt like I was somewhat on my own in this space, and learning interesting things about medicine and meeting clinicians from overseas. And I wanted to create a platform where GPs could come together and we could potentially, put webinars on and topical conversations, just so doctors could feel a little bit more informed about this subject. And this is just a screenshot from the website, but we do events and webinars, and some of the guys here on the talk are part of the wider team. So it's a bit of just a collaborative effort, really, to try and get this better understood by frontline doctors who often know very little about this subject. And this is the survey now that we did last year. This was really because, I wanted to find out a bit more about what was going on in the UK in primary care. It's safe to say that a lot of people are talking about medical cannabis, and lots of people, in fact, a huge number of people are using over-the-counter CBD. So these conversations are going on up and down the country between GPs and patients, but not a lot is known about what the outcomes are, or what the doctors are saying, or the patients are being told. So this is really an attitude survey that we ran through the PCCN. It was undertaken by MediConnect, They interviewed just over 1,000 GPs from across the whole of the UK. And I was always curious, how do you get to 1,000 GPs? It's hard to get any of these people, any of us together, but it was actually done through doctors.net. That's their channel. So it was done via email, and they did manage to get a lot of responses. It was made up of 10 questions. And what I've done here is just kind of summarize the findings. Some of you may have seen this paper already, but for those of you who haven't, I'll just talk you through the key areas. So we had a really good range of doctors from different backgrounds, generally slightly towards young, middle-aged cohort here, and almost an equal split of male to female. Most of the doctors were GP partners. The key message here is GPs are being asked frequently about CBD and medical cannabis. Now, this was a year ago, and I expect these figures to have gone up slightly in that time. But I guess on average, overall, doctors are probably being asked between at least every 3 to 6 months. There's kind of a conversation going on there for most GPs. And we asked what kind of tools and learning tools would be most useful. Summaries of evidence-based research is obviously extremely important. Accredited focused e-learning, desktop guides, which is something we're quite familiar with. I think I've got most of my knowledge from speaking to overseas doctors and really kind of just learning through podcasts and webinars and things, which is perhaps slightly less appealing for a lot of GPs. But I think that's where a bulk of the education has been going on in the last couple of years, particularly during COVID. And then we asked about what benefits, if any, do you think cannabis-based medicines can offer? So there is a good support here for those patients who have exhausted licensed medicines, improved quality of life. And then we go through multi-symptom management, no benefits. So across the board, I think we were getting almost a third of doctors who didn't really see many benefits to this at all. Which, if any, of the following conditions would you support the use of a cannabis-based medicine? Now, if you look at the conditions that are supported most strongly, these are, in fact, the licensed medicines do exist for these conditions. So we've got Sativex for spasticity and MS. Intractable epilepsy, we have Epidiolex. So they are understandably perhaps better supported than others. But palliative care is high. Cancer pain. What's very interesting, I thought, was that the mood disorders such as anxiety and PTSD, ADHD, depression, are not particularly well supported, but we're seeing a lot of patients in the private sector, and particularly through T21, being prescribed for those conditions. That might be due to the preconceptions that a lot of us have around cannabis and mental health. In fact, I think a lot of us, in fairness, do have. We can all picture some patients who have found cannabis to be quite detrimental to their mental health. So I do understand that, but it's interesting that it doesn't quite match up with prescribing trends that are actually going on day to day. What are your main concerns? The big concern is around the unlicensed nature of the medicines, lack of efficacy, in perhaps interactions with other prescribed medicines or some side effects. And then we looked at whether GPs would support the idea of specialist GP prescribers. Pretty even spread here with yes, no, and not sure, but actually the yes taking the lead there. So almost 40% supporting this concept. Have you ever prescribed medicines with a specials route? And that's because at the moment these are specials. No, I would not do so, 45%. And then just moving on to the last question, do you think GPs should have the ability to prescribe and oversee cannabis-based medicines? And the majority of, understandably, according to the poll, was no, and almost a quarter said yes, which is actually quite a significant number, I think, given the volume of doctors, the number of doctors that were spoken to. So I guess the key findings here were that, first of all, this is a subject that's spoken about commonly. Day to day, doctors are being are being spoken to by patients about this subject. And understandably, as we've seen elsewhere across the world, GPs are largely conservative in their attitudes, although there are a proportion who do recognise a role. I've said some of these things here, but essentially the conditions that are supported are primarily the licensed treatments, but also there was a recognition that perhaps these medicines would benefit those patients that have exhausted other treatment pathways. I did want to put a couple of the quotes that we got back. I mean, we did get quite a few sort of free text answers coming through, and some of them were, some GPs have very strong views on this, you might just want to quickly have a look at those yourself. But it does seem to create quite a knee-jerk reaction for some, which I think is interesting, and it does need to be addressed. I mean, some GPs said that perhaps this should never be a medicine that's prescribed, and it should be like alcohol, and patients could choose to use it if they wish. But we did get a lot of positive responses coming through, and lots of GPs that said, they're more interested in learning more about this, and they see a role for it. I also, this is sort of a separate area really, but when I put the study out, I did speak to patients who I've got to know over the last few years. And what I found was that also they find this a very unpredictable experience for them. Some patients have had a really positive response from their GPs, but other patients have actually found this experience really distressing, and they've sort of lost trust in their doctors because it's been ridiculed, or they've really kind of found their GPs come back with a very strong opinion about this, despite perhaps not even knowing a lot about it. So, I think really the closing thoughts for me on this were that there's a lot of variation up and down the country, and it's reasonable to assume that the consultations are quite unpredictable for patients. And ultimately, like any other area of medicine, particularly given how this is evolving at such pace, I do think that doctors need to just be well informed. And I genuinely believe that even if you know a little bit about this subject, your views often change because you start to learn about the great benefits of this as a medicine. So education really moving forwards now, this is really where it all lies, in my opinion, and we need to make sure doctors are kept up to date about treatments, and also that we don't just kind of sit within our bubble in the UK and wait for RCTs, that we actually look at what's going on elsewhere. And there are lots of interesting observational studies. Lots of countries have found a way around some of these hurdles, and they are prescribing widely for conditions that we see in primary care. I think this is more than just about cannabis for me personally. I think cannabis fits into this perhaps a slightly new way of practicing medicine, a bit more about patient choice. It offers the ability to help de-prescribe, and it's just a very useful tool, I think, in a clinician's toolbox that can really be life-changing for a lot of patients. Doctors are often seen as, well, GPs in particular are often seen as gatekeepers, but I feel that sometimes our hands are tied. And I think we all have to admit that we're not always practicing in the best way. There was an interesting study of only about 2 years ago that found that 1 in 4 adults in the UK are inappropriately being prescribed either a benzo, a Z drug, a gabapentinoid, or a strong opioid. So, I think our prescribing habits can sometimes be suboptimal and potentially not always in the best interests of our patients. I think GPs personally are very well placed to prescribe this medicine. I'm interested in whether we get there or not, but this idea that perhaps we might have specialist GPs out there in the communities that could prescribe and take referrals from colleagues. And I believe that we need a bit of a narrative shift on this, really, and that we, rather than seeing this as potentially extra work for GPs, I believe that medical cannabis could potentially help solve some of the problems that we currently have around referrals to secondary care or pain clinics. and I think we could actually use this as a way to potentially reduce some GP workload and improve outcomes for patients. And we're very lucky in that we can look abroad and see the trends, the prescribing trends, and the outcomes there. And it really does show itself to be very effective across the board. I think we need more health economic analysis studies as well to be able to kind of demonstrate that this could be very helpful. Right, closing slides now. I've put this in previous talks, but I think the part of the problem we have is that the law was changed in reaction to a political situation, and it wasn't really thought through, perhaps in the right way, or perhaps thinking about the long-term effects. And actually, what's happened is I do think we've seen an industry come forward quite quickly into this space, and clinics appear, but we're trying to fit this into a very set system and quite an old-fashioned way of practicing medicine that we have here in the UK. A little bit of recommended reading. These are all fantastic books, and I've certainly learned a lot from all of these. And if anyone wants to get in touch, here are my details. I'll be happy to answer questions through email or via the chat a bit later on. Okay, I hope that was useful. And I will now hand over to, who have we got next?
I'm going to do an introduction, Leon. Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Thank you so much for that. So next up, we've got Dr. Mark Smith. Now, Mark lives over in Australia at the moment, so he's very kindly recorded this presentation, especially for us this evening. He is a UK-trained GP who has moved to Perth in Western Australia back in 2015. He's moving back to the UK in 2 months' time, having been locked safely away, those are his words, not mine, in Western Australia since COVID started. So I will share my screen now and play Mark's presentation, which will be about 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this part of the meeting where we're going to talk about GPs prescribing medical cannabis in another English-speaking country, in this case, Australia, where I'm currently sat. My name is Mark Smith. I am a UK-trained GP, obviously. I did my medical training at Southampton back in the 80s, my GP training on the Isle of Wight, and then became a principal in Dorset. My wife and I, she's a GP as well, came out here to Western Australia, to Perth, Fremantle actually, in 2013. And we are embarrassingly still pretty much COVID-free, have been throughout. And that's partly, well, mainly because we are still behind closed borders, closed internal borders. There's no freedom of travel between Western Australia and other states, let alone out of the country. But we have our tickets booked to come back to the UK permanently in March. And I hope to be able to carry on medical cannabis prescribing when we get back. So a bit of background, the law was changed about 2 years ago to allow GPs to prescribe medical cannabis. This was after several years of it being specialist only, and to try and reduce the costs for patients, because it's all private. GPs were then co-opted to join in. And it wasn't long before the first patients came along asking us for prescriptions, and we had to find out pretty quickly how to do it. The process looked pretty complicated. A bit of Googling and I discovered that the first company to get a license to grow medical cannabis in Australia was called Little Green Farmer, or is called Little Green Farmer, and they're based here in Perth. So they were very helpful explaining the process and getting me set up, and I'm sure they've helped lots of other GPs here as well get the hang of things. So to start with, it's quite easy. Patient comes along, you have a chat about which product that you'll be thinking of prescribing, and then we have to go through a online process of submitting what you're wanting to do, what you're wanting to prescribe, and submitting about one side of A4 as your justification plan. So what are you prescribing? Why are you prescribing it? What has been tried before? And you don't have to, like the UK, you don't have to have tried every single painkiller before you're allowed to apply, which is an awful lot simpler and more sensible. So this is all uploaded and it's checked over at the federal level, at the national level, and within a few days normally you get approved. As long as you're not prescribing THC to under 18s, then it's pretty straightforward. So you get your patient back, you produce the prescription, you tell them how you're going to follow them up, and off they go to the pharmacist, and usually they can get hold of the prescription within a day or two, but actually the system's got a bit simpler, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So that's how most GPs do their prescribing until they've got the hang of it. And once you've done a dozen or so initiations, you can apply to become an authorized prescriber. So an authorized prescriber, there's a few hundred of us now in Australia, is somebody who doesn't have to apply every time they want to prescribe. As long as it's a product that you're approved for, and in my case, it's mostly Little Green Farmers products, just because they're local, you can do the prescription on the spot. So what becomes considerably easier from the patient's point of view is that they'll come and see you in a special long appointment, possibly not something the NHS would be able to cope with to start with. You can usually do the assessment within 30 to 45 minutes, depending on whether I've met the patient before. And you decide on what you want to prescribe. And if it's something you're authorized to prescribe, you can do the prescription on the spot. And the patient will go to the local pharmacy who stocks it, and they will have the product the same day. So it's a considerably easier process than it might be in the UK. Now, why do I still do prescribing? I mean, some days it's about half of my clinic will be initiations or follow-ups. So it's become a large part of my GP workload. And I'm going to show you the auditing that I've been doing, the recording I've been doing of all of my prescriptions, and it'll make a little bit more sense. So just going to flick over onto these charts I've been keeping. So in 2 years since GPs were allowed to prescribe, I'm now up to 498 separate initiations. Sometimes that'll be for replacement products, or sometimes that'll be for two products on the same day. For example, a THC containing product for evening dose, and then a CBD only product for daytime use. The reason for that is that there are some unusual driving laws in Australia. There's something called random breath tests, RBT, very well known to everyone. I've never been breathalyzed in the UK, never. And here I've been breathalyzed at least 5 times, as the police will set up roadblocks and breathalyze, even in the morning, everyone going through. And if they don't like the look of you, they'll do a saliva swab, looking to see if you've got any methamphetamine, very popular here, or THC in your saliva. And therefore, therefore people don't want to get caught, so they would only want to use a CBD product for their daytime dose. Same goes for a lot of important employment categories here, such as mining, which is a massive part of the WA economy. They have random drug tests at work, obviously, and can't test positive for anything that's in their urine. So anyway, out of those 498, probably about 460, 470 separate patients. So an enormous number in just 2 years. The majority of my prescribing would be Little Green Farmer, for the reasons I've mentioned. They're local, they grow it here in WA and make it here. Some other products that other patients will have researched and would have been keen to try. And CBD being the majority, the vast majority of the oils that I've prescribed. Some THC, a balanced half and half, and then all the other sort of more niche products, if you like. Commonest indication I found would be for pain, and then anxiety and sleep disorders. So all the traditional illnesses, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, epilepsy that people hear about, that medical cannabis is wonderful for. Well, they're far less common than people who suffer with pain and anxiety and sleep problems. And this is a large chunk of a GP's workload, I'm sure you'll all agree. And it just shows what we can do for these people that up until now will be being prescribed medicines that don't suit them terribly well, don't work very well. And I'm thinking of the likes of Lyrica and opiates and benzodiazepines and SSRIs, which are prescribed, in my opinion, like Smarties over here. Teenagers on SSRIs, teenagers on benzodiazepines, terribly backward prescribing and not good for them. So the responses I've had, so these charts indicate that white, patients haven't come back for follow-up yet, haven't seen them again, so they can be discarded for now. But those who have had success for anxiety versus those who haven't, the orange thin line there is more to do with people who maybe responded or have swapped to a different product. For example, somebody trying to help their sleep problems, initially tried CBD because they were a bit scared, a bit wary maybe of THC, then have returned, not better, and flipped over onto a THC containing product for sleep. So whether it's pain, anxiety, sleep disorders, and fairly decent numbers of patients, you'll agree, the vast majority being helped. So that's why I still prescribe it so much, because it's just so rewarding. And for those of us who have to deal with pain patients and people with terrible sleep, and they don't want to take hypnotics and we don't want them to get addicted to opiates, we now have a new medicine or a new combination of medicines that's safe, non-addictive, and as you can see, tremendously effective. Just going to pause a second. There are a lot of reasons why this experience couldn't be applied to the UK. I mean, it's simple to do, it's well within any GP's competence, and with the safety profile that is pretty obvious, I really don't know what should be stopping it. Obviously, a change in the law is what's required to make it easier for GPs to prescribe private medications. That's a big hurdle to get over, but my message is that this is something that within a year or two has just got to happen. It's such a useful medicine. So I hope that's been useful. I hope you've enjoyed the view, the Indian Ocean sitting out there, looking quite nice today as you sit there in the cold back in the UK. But hopefully I'll meet quite a few of you in person in a few months' time when I get back to the UK. So thanks for listening, and back to your host.
Brilliant. I hope everyone really enjoyed that talk from Dr. Mark Smith. Okay, welcome back for our second half of this evening, Medical Cannabis Prescribing for GPs. Hope you managed to grab a cup of tea in that break. And I'm now going to introduce Dr. Mark Wilbourn. Dr. Mark Wilbourn is a GP prescriber working in Jersey. Mark trained at the University of Southampton and currently works part-time for Windsor Medical Practice and for the Medical Cannabis Clinics. He's a GP appraiser as well, a former advanced trauma life support instructor, and a trustee of the Oxygen Centre and Barrow Chamber operator. Welcome, Mark. Lovely to have you.
Okay, so I'm a GP in Jersey. I trained in Dorset, in Bournemouth as a GP. But actually I started off at the University of Southampton, where they educated us for 5 years that cannabis was a terrible thing. It had no medicinal properties, and it was used by druggies and nobody else. But on the back of that, they can't control what patients tell us. And so in my first year at university, we had something called early patient contact, where we were taken out to a GP. The GP sat and talked to us for some time. And he told us about this patient who had terrible rheumatoid arthritis. He'd been on gold injections, which had made his arthritis a lot better. but then it had messed up his kidneys. So they'd stopped the gold injections and he got a lot worse. And then all of a sudden he started getting better. And the GP didn't know why. And none of the specialists knew why. And this was before the era of biologics. And then he took us out in his car and left either 3 or 4 of us talking to this patient for an hour. And after about half an hour of talking to the patient, he led us through to his greenhouse and said, provided you promise not to tell my GP and not to tell my specialist or the police, I'll tell you why I'm getting better. And he showed us all these wonderful cannabis plants. And he self-treated with cannabis that he was growing himself, and he felt a lot better. And everybody had seen that. So when cannabis was legalized in Jersey, and it was legalized for all doctors, the opportunity came up to prescribe for patients. And so I leapt at it because I'd been preconditioned with the idea that it was beneficial for some people. So we started by doing a session with Prof. Barnes, who filled us in with the basics. And then I've acquired more knowledge through the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society, the International College of Cannabis Medicine, the concierge service by Althea, and I did an e-learning for health module as well. The Jersey law is different to the UK in that any doctor can prescribe cannabis. It can be GPs, specialists, or even junior doctors. But the reality is that it's mainly GPs. There is one A&E consultant who's doing it. I understand there's a new clinic just opening up that's going to be some middle grades from various different departments of the hospital. We do what we call MDTs, but in fact, they're not really MDTs, they're more case conferences because it's all GPs, it isn't a multidisciplinary team. There's no requirement to do it, but we think it's good practice. We've had input from the drug squad because initially, when we started doing this, I phoned the police and said, what are you doing about policing? And they said, policing what? And I said, well, the law change. And they said, we haven't been told about any law change. So that came as quite a surprise to them. So after being bounced from pillar and post, I got put in touch with somebody from the drug squad, and we came up with some sensible things between ourselves. One of the benefits of being in a place like Jersey is it's small and the Minister of Health is accessible. So I've got his personal email, and I can fire questions at him if I need to. On the island of Jersey, the provision is on island, there's the Medical Cannabis Clinic, there's Medican Jersey, and there's Sasuda. The Sasuda clinic is a single GP who works with a couple of nurses. The Medican clinic is constantly changing, but at the moment it seems to be mainly GPs, and there's the one A&E consultant. And TMCC, it's all GPs. Patients have the option to go off island and use any of the UK providers. But the downside of doing that is that they have to source out their own import licenses, and that's time consuming and costly. There are currently 2 pharmacies who've got involved, and I think 2 more who are looking to start doing it. There's a pharmacy called Reed's, which is the one that we use. And the really convenient thing about that is that they're in our building. So we when we do the follow-ups, and we don't need to discuss a patient because it's a straightforward continuation. We just give the prescription to the patient and they take it straight down to the pharmacy and they can walk away with their cannabis. There's another pharmacy called LV that works quite closely with Medican, and Tasuda use reads as well. One of the things I did quite early on is I realized that there was a bit of a lack of knowledge amongst patients about the way in which things had changed. So I updated our website and put a cannabis section on it. And so I find it's the best way of keeping patients informed. And every time I see them, I tell them to read the pages again. One of the benefits of Jersey is that every GP practice is on EMIS Web, and they're all linked. We don't have the NHS spying, so it's a little bit different. With the patient's consent, we can access their own GP records, and we can see exactly what their GPs tried for them first. I created a template, a protocol, and various different document templates, so we can print scripts straight from the computer on sheets of blank A4 with no need for the FP10 PCDs, so there's no pink pads. The letter that we give them every time we see them was one of the things that we agreed with the police, because that way the police have some way of seeing, is this a genuine prescription, or is it illicit cannabis? So that leaflet acts in two ways. One, it's got the website links with a QR code, and the other is it provides the police with some kind of evidence that they're using prescribed cannabis. So in terms of policing, we've had contact with the drug squad. There was a data protection officer within the practice who unfortunately insists that we stick to the tried and tested ways of communicating with the police when we need to breach confidentiality, and basically tell the police that the person they've got in custody is a genuine patient. We have a primary care governance team who we can discuss patients with if we have any concerns, and they have a link with the police. So if there's any patients who are potentially selling on their cannabis, we can find out in that way. The other thing is that there is a chief pharmacist who sees all the cannabis prescriptions, whether they're on island or off island, and he approves all of them. So if there's any duplication, he can see that. But one of the things which I just wanted to mention is that lots of clinics seem to run telephone consultations. Now, telephone consultations are great, but the problem with cannabis is, or one of the problems with cannabis is that it can make fast AF worse. And so obviously wouldn't want to prescribe it for patients in fast AF. So I had a patient who came into surgery and he struggled to walk through the door. His respiratory rate was about 30 breaths a minute. And when I felt his pulse, it was very regular. I sent him to A&E. saying, I'm not going to give you any cannabis today. And when he came back, I was expecting a bit of a bust up, but he turned out to be immensely grateful. And the first words out of his mouth were, "You saved my life." The AF was actually secondary to avascular necrosis of the hip and osteomyelitis, and nothing to do with cannabis at all. But I was very pleased that that situation turned out well. And I don't think it would have been picked up if it had all been by telephone. In Jersey, we've got about 2,000 patients who are currently receiving medical cannabis. And if you scale that up to the UK size of population, that's just under 1 million. Sorry, just over 1 million. So if the Jersey experience is repeated in the UK, there's potentially a lot of patients out there who would benefit. It's a fantastic treatment, and we certainly see patients improve dramatically when we treat them with medical cannabis.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was brilliant. Thank you very, very much. And if you do have any questions for Mark, he'll be taking part in our Q&A at the end of today's session as well. So please just put your questions in the Q&A. Next up, we've got Dr. Dani Gordon. Dani is a GP and medical cannabis expert, and as rightly pointed out by Leon, she's also an author. She published a book called The CBD Bible, and has and so you can find that at all bookstores. Dani is a double board certified medical doctor, integrative medicine doctor, and world leading expert in CBD, cannabis medicine, brain wellness, and stress resilience. She was one of the youngest physicians to become American board certified in integrative medicine, co-founded the UK Medical Cannabis Clinician Society, and trained the UK's first cannabis medicine specialist, and has helped set up the UK's first cannabis medicine centre. Oh, is that all, Dani? Goodness. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Dani Gordon. Thank you.
So I was trained as a GP in Canada, and then I went on to do an integrative medicine fellowship in the States, which is now recognized as an American board certified specialty in the US, just like any other specialty of medicine. And most Ivy League schools now have an integrated medicine training program. It's not yet recognized here in the UK, which is why here in the UK I am registered as a GP. So I started prescribing medical cannabis to my patients many years ago after working as a GP and an integrated medicine specialist, and really realizing that a lot of my patients were using cannabis already on their own for a lot of their medical conditions. And as an integrated medicine doctor, I thought I was very open-minded, and I was teaching my patients mindfulness-based stress reduction. I would put them, on my exam table and teach them tissue box breathing when they were having anxiety attacks. And I was doing all the stuff that I thought was, pretty avant-garde in my integrative family medicine practice. But actually, I had quite a reluctance and still kind of a stigma towards cannabis, even though I used other herbal preparations for sleep instead of benzodiazepines, and I was doing all this other kind of holistic, but very evidence-based stuff, in addition to normal GP prescribing. And what really changed my mind was my patients' results with the medical cannabis that they were using, really from the gray market at that point, because this is before legalization in Canada. And also myself becoming a chronic pain patient. I had a really terrible accident about 6-7 years ago now, and I shattered my hand. I blew my scaphoidal ligament apart. I had 2 semi-successful surgeries to put it back together. And because I had a lot of nerve pain and nerve damage, I was told by various top-level consultants on 2 different continents that I would very likely end up with chronic complex regional pain syndrome. And, this is at this point, in my integrative medicine practice, which, really is a family medicine practice, more with an integrative slant, I was treating a lot of patients with these types of chronic pain conditions. And I didn't want to take Lyrica. I didn't want to take some of these other medications like the opioid class. So I actually decided to try topical cannabis preparation on myself. And it worked so well that my nerve pain was so much better. I could sleep through the night again. And it just really turned my quality of life around in about a week of using it. And that was just the topical preparation. So after that, I decided that I really needed to take the plunge after my patients asking me for years to start adding medical cannabis to my prescribing routine. And I did, and I really never looked back. And, as a GP, I feel that we are so well placed to use this medication with our patients, because the thing about medical cannabis is it really is a trans-diagnostic medication. You are not really just treating their anxiety with medical cannabis or their depression, because as Leon had this nice slide that showed the endocannabinoid system, and I do have some slides that we can't see right now that show the same thing in more detail. We have this system in our body that uses these plant compounds. And the reason that medical cannabis products seem to target so many different and diverse symptoms in so many different body systems is because of the cannabinoid receptors in virtually all of our organs. So we have cannabinoid receptors in our immune system, in our gut, in the women's female reproductive tract, in the uterus. We have them obviously in the brain and the spinal cord. In different locations, we have different types of cannabinoid receptors. We have more CB1 receptors, which respond more to THC in some parts of the brain. We have more CB2 receptors, which basically do something a little bit different with the immune system in the rest of the body. And CBD kind of acts on both receptors in a second messenger way. So all that to say that, it really makes sense that this medication be involved in people who do primary care, because we don't just see our patients for a specific organ system or condition. We see all of our patients' conditions. And I think that's why medical cannabis was so successful for me in my practice, because I was seeing, I really specialize in complex primary care perspective. That's what I do. And what I was seeing with medical cannabis once I got started, and I was very hesitant at the beginning, even though, I have, specialist level training in botanical medicines, but, it seemed very scary to me to prescribe this medicine, because it just has so much stigma attached to it. And, there's not really a rule book, especially back then. There wasn't a lot of training available. So, when I started out, I was skeptical. I was scared I was going to do harm, do it wrong. And what I found actually, instead of that, was that my patients responded incredibly well. The side effect profile was very low when we use the start low, go slow approach, which I really advocate for. And starting with a high CBD, low THC ratio for most people. And that they just got better across so many different symptom clusters and domains. So for example, I would do the fatigue severity score, and that would get better. Their GAD-7 and their PHQ-9 would get better. Their sleep would get better. And not just that, but then the quality of life things that we see as GPs started getting better too. So I have patients who would come back to me and say, doctor, this stuff saved my marriage, because I could actually interact with my family again, because my pain was under better control than it has been with opioids. I've weaned lots of patients off of their opioids completely, very slowly, of course, and use medical cannabis as a substitute for chronic pain conditions, especially the chronic pain conditions where opioids were probably inappropriate to begin with, but the doctor had no other choice at the time. So these people end up on so many opioids, and they get, then they get centrally sensitized to the opioids, and then they get their hyperanalalgesia from the opioids. It's just a vicious cycle. The same with my patients who were on a lot of benzodiazepines and sedative hypnotics for their sleep. A lot of times we would transition them completely and do a cross taper over a number of months onto the low dose medical cannabis with great success. improved quality of life, improved symptom symptom side effect profiles. And I've today, knock on wood, not had one episode of psychosis or serious adverse effect. Of course, practicing cautiously in areas where that's really necessary, like Mark actually touched on, patients with cardiac history, atrial fibrillation, you do have to be quite careful, but it is possible. So I think that's really the message I really want to bring, is that as GPs, we can do it. Here in the UK, we have a shared care arrangement, so it's a bit different. So now that I'm back in the UK, even though I've trained many of the specialists here and I'm a very experienced prescriber, I have to prescribe in my own clinic in a shared care arrangement. And shared care arrangements can look different for different situations. For example, if you're a GP listening to this and you just want to dip your toes in the water, but you don't really want to start prescribing quite yet, you could refer your patient to a medical cannabis clinic. There's a whole list of them now through the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society. We have a full list, and it's always being updated. Through that clinic, you will probably, if you would like, and your patient agrees, you will receive a letter back about how it goes, how they're doing on their medical cannabis, and that might give you a little bit more confidence to get more involved. Some of the medical cannabis clinics do work with GPs who have a situation where the patient will be referred back to you as the GP if you would like to enter into a shared care arrangement. And then there's other clinics like myself where I work within my clinic. So I'm the GP in our clinic. Eventually, once we are busier, we will have other GPs join us. And I have my practice partner is a specialist. So he is a GMC registered psychiatrist and geriatrician. So he does the first prescription for medical cannabis. We also we have an integrated medicine model. So we don't just do cannabis. We have a slightly different model. But in the situations where you're in your own clinic, in a private clinic, where you might be the GP and there might be other specialists involved, it's actually even easier to do a shared care agreement, because the communication, which is a necessity for shared care, is very direct, and you're working in a team very closely with each other already. So there's many ways it can work. You can set up your own shared care templates and arrangements depending on what you decide with the colleagues you're going to be sharing care with is going to work best for you and your specialist colleagues. But after you take some training, which there's many options available now to do that, unlike when I was first prescribing, I guess almost 10 years ago now, it felt like a bit of cowboy territory. So now there's many good options. And to be fair, the same options that you're going to be undertaking for your education as a GP are the same ones that our specialist colleagues are doing too. So there's really no reason why we can't become confident in prescribing this medication here in the UK. And I think, to be honest, I think for patients to get the most out of their medical cannabis, GPs have to be involved, because we take this whole transdiagnostic approach to our patients' care. And that's not something a specialist can do, because they're really narrowly focused and they need to be narrowly focused on their specific area. So for me, I think it's just absolutely essential. And I'm quite excited about the prospect of more GP colleagues getting involved here. So those are really my main points. And I can take a few questions for a few minutes, if that's okay with you, Megs, if there is any.
To be honest, Dani, you've done such a great job at going through so much detail there. And I also noticed that you have been answering some questions during this evening in the Q&A already. As it's just a Q&A function, people will need to put their questions in there for you. But I just want to say a huge thank you for your time, Dani. I know that you have to go and look after a one-year-old now.
Okay.
So thank you very much. And if there are any questions for Dani after she's gone, then I will make sure that they get through to they're put through to Dani. No problem at all. Please do keep your questions coming into the Q&A. Thank you, Dani.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
So we move on to the final part of this evening. And I'd like to welcome onto the screen two more prescribers, in addition to Mark Wilbourn, who you've already heard from, and from Dr. Leon Barron, who we've already heard from as well. We have, first off, Dr. Harrison Offiong, who is a GP shared care prescriber for My Access clinics. Dr. Harrison Offiong is an experienced sessional GP who's worked in a number of clinical settings in the NHS, including A&E, urgent care walk-in centres and GP surgeries. And then finally, to welcome on screen Dr. Charlotte Cox, who is a GP prescriber for Medican in Jersey. Charlotte qualified from St Mary's Hospital, London in 1988 and began her career in emergency medicine, then moving over to become a GP. And she now works with Medican UK as a GP prescriber. Perfect. So, first question is for Harrison, really, to tell us a little bit about your journey, about your background, and how you came to become a UK GP prescriber of medical cannabis. What got you interested in prescribing medical cannabis?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mike, for inviting me to be on this panel. I feel quite honored to be in the midst of such great personalities and cool medical cannabis prescribers. As you said already, my name is Harrison Offiong. I'm a GP. I'm originally from Nigeria, and I came to the UK in 2009. I have a master's in public health, and I started working as a GP in 2015 after qualifying from the Black Country VTS. So how did I get into prescribing medicinal cannabis? I think it all started during the lockdown when, I was looking for what else to do because we're all locked down. And I had a chat with a couple of colleagues in Canada and Australia, and I heard about them prescribing medicinal cannabis over there. So I did a bit of research, and I came across a company called Medicaleaf, got in touch with them, asked a few questions, and I was referred to the Medicinal Cannabis Clinicians Society, who referred me to Drug Science, and I got in touch with Mags. And from there, I asked about prescribing in the UK, and she put me in touch with 3 clinics in the UK, of which one was My Access Clinic. And quite quickly, really, from there, Karen at My Access Clinics managed to get me set up, got me my pink prescription pad, my PIN number, and before I knew it, I was prescribing from, I think, April last year. So it was quite rapid for me in a way. And I think the main reason I went into it was I was always thinking, as a GP, when I see patients, I need to have options for them. And most times you get lots of heart-sink patients who've been referred to the pain clinic, the neurologist, and then they've done everything for them and they refer back to the GP, and then I feel like, oh, I don't have anything else to offer them. So for me, this was like a new an extra tool in the box, which I could offer to patients. And I must say, since I've started prescribing, I've really enjoyed it. I've got such positive feedback from patients. And like I said, I think it's something that all GPs should be doing. So yes, that's me in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thanks, Harrison. That's wonderful. And Charlotte, I'd love to hear similarly from you a little bit about your journey and what got you interested in medical cannabis.
Thanks so much, and thanks again to follow these amazing speakers. So I won't go over some of the ground that they've done, but basically, quickly, my journey from 1988 in London, I did my hospital work, but then it took me to Kenya. And I was both an emergency medicine doctor and then later a GP. But I was also working in a voluntary basis, looking after a lot of people, and got very interested in just whole health and nutrition and looking after people in a lot of poverty as well. So I had that journey, and then I came back to UK. I became a GP partner in the Cotswolds, and it's quite a rural practice. But married again and ended up as a farmer and with a hospitality background. So I've actually spent many years being a farmer and growing organic fruits and vegetables and propagation of plants, of course, cannabis to me is very interesting, particularly the organic and all the whole benefits of the whole plant. So that's my I've worn lots of hats, including being a mum of 4 children, which I think counts as life experience and helps you in your GP life. So South Africa didn't let me work as a GP, but I did a lot of other voluntary projects. A lot of it was, again, based in township work and nutrition projects and helping everybody have as best health as possible within their circumstances. And then we came to Jersey. So that's when I met Mark. And Mark's been amazing, helping me integrate back into traditional GP life. I was working with Mark in medical cannabis clinics, and we started at the same time. So that was wonderful. And thank you, Mark, for all your help and support. And I will just say, because I know everybody's a bit end of the evening, as a GP, we've heard all the wonderful benefits, but it is actually an amazing team, and this MDT approach and the fact that there's cross-referencing, you learn so much, from your colleagues, but I might also say you learn a lot from your patients. Because if 1.5 million people are self-prescribing and they've worked it out for themselves, you can have a lot of input from your patients if you open that question. So I'm similar to Dani in that I've also done training in integrative medicine. I'm very interested in nutrition and whole health. And I think we should be called perhaps not general practitioners, but whole health practitioners. So we do deal with multiple problems on a regular basis, and trying to squeeze them into a 10-minute consultation can be challenging. So this is an amazing plant which has so many good benefits, which I hope those of you who are interested will go ahead and learn some more, and on all those wonderful links. Even just simple things like the Cannabis Health magazine is just a good start. LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, join in, you'll learn so much. And obviously to do the proper course, I certainly would recommend that. So I had a year approximately with Mark, and then my husband's work took into UK. So I've now moved to UK. But it's been a challenge, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that later. And actually what's happened is that because it is quite challenging starting, and I have with 200 and something patients before leaving Jersey and well over 300 now, as a lead prescriber, I've found it easier just to commute to and from Guernsey and Jersey. So I'm actually one of the lead doctors in Guernsey as well as Jersey now. So that's me, and happy to answer any other more specific questions later.
Thank you, Charlotte. Just staying on your point there around your commute to Jersey and Guernsey, how are you finding this setup and being, I suppose, thought of, alongside specialist consultants, equal to them as a prescriber?
Yeah, I think, and I feel very valued because of that. And not that I didn't when I was before with the GPs, but in this realm, and I'm actually delighted that the news is Harvard, for instance, is now going to set up a whole new specialty in medical cannabis. They're going to have it almost like cardiology or endocrine medicine. So it's out there. Other countries are perhaps a bit ahead of us, but it is really nice. I mean, I have 30-something years experience, and Mark's super experienced. We've seen quite a lot in our years. And with my integrative background as well, I really feel that I also add value. So we, in fact, on our clinic, I have, I'm the only GP, well, there's a couple in Jersey, but the Guernsey team are all other specialists. So, and I even cross-consult with psychiatrists and other neurologists as well. So you have access with these patients who, all of them, because it's a treatment of last resort, they've all had a very complex journey. And so it's wonderful to have that support around your colleagues, but also your experience you share with the other doctors. So you are an equal member in the team, and that's great. I mean, I've done lots and lots of extra training thanks to the Medical Cannabis Society, and it all ends up being free links. So you can do an hour or two a week if you like. From and a lot of them are from like Dani, from across years and years of experience. So, and of course you have forums and you can answer questions and have them on your, so you don't have to feel alone as a GP. You can go to a huge network of doctors and ask advice, which is great.
Thank you. I think that's a really great point, actually, there, Charlotte. I did share just now the link to the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society. So please do check that out. And do also check out Leon's website for the Primary Cannabis Care Network as well. There you can also, really tap into that network of GPs and other doctors who are interested in prescribing. And as Charlotte says, you're not alone. I think it's really valuable in this emerging industry that doctors are talking to each other and sharing the experiences that they're hearing from their patients so that we can all learn from one another. Harrison, going back to you, you're a prescriber, a GP prescriber at My Access clinics under a shared care agreement arrangement. Would you mind just talking a little bit about what that setup is like and whether it might actually be in any way a hindrance to building up rapport with patients? I'd love to know a little bit more about that setup.
Yes, thanks a lot for that, Mags. Well, so the shared care agreement is part of the MDT under which I prescribe. So basically, what happens is on the day when I'm having patients, I only see the follow-up patients at the moment. So patients who are stable and have been initiated on medicinal cannabis by the consultant. But the team would send me a list of the patients, and so I have a little bit of background about them and what they've been prescribed. And then I'll see them do the consultation, find out how they're doing, what medication they're taking, what dosage they're taking, if they're getting any side effects. And if everything is okay, I can then re-prescribe their medication. However, there might be times where they want to change something around, or they want to increase the dose or reduce the dose. So in that situation, what I would do is complete the consultation with them, but then I'll go back to an MDT meeting and discuss the case. And the MDT consists of consultants from different specialties, like pain consultants and psychiatrists. And when we've discussed the case, if they agree with the plan, then I can go ahead and write the new prescription or adjust the dose accordingly. In terms of building rapport, does it hinder or affect that? Yeah, I think yes and no, because in a way it kind of limits my ability to prescribe and practice independently. But so that's the yes part. But the no part is the fact that I'm relatively inexperienced in a way, and I'm still learning every day. So the fact that I have that MDT and shared care arrangement as a background, where I can go and ask questions and make sure that I'm doing the right thing, it definitely helps. When I say to a patient, okay, you want this, but I need to run it by the MDT team, I think they have a little bit of confidence that, okay, they're going to get the right choice rather than me just doing it offhand in an independent way. So yes, it definitely breaks that rapport and efficiency of just prescribing, as most GPs would want to do. But then it also gives me a bit of security to make sure I'm doing the right thing. So yeah, and I think there was a question about that in the chat. So I think that sort of answers that question at the same time too.
Yeah, so the question was from Daniel Barkley asking, how do you work around the law around having to be a specialist to prescribe? So yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Yep, thank you.
Perfect, thanks very much. So next I'd love to hear from a couple of you around the benefits that you're hearing from patients and the experiences that you're hearing from patients. Mark, are you there as well? I'd love to bring you back into this discussion if you're here. Mark, if I could start with you, would you mind telling us a little bit about what benefits you're hearing from patients and also whether they're reporting any adverse effects at all?
I've had a handful of patients who've had adverse effects. So they've just not tolerated the feeling taking cannabis. But out of the 100 that I've treated, that's really quite a small number. And when you think about the patients that you treat with an anti-inflammatory who tell you about stomach pain, it's a really small proportion. The the patients really come in to the clinic and tell you that it's been life-changing, and it completely transforms their lives from misery to happiness, and you see the change in their expression. The patients with things like ADHD, they start communicating properly, and you see a transformation in the color of the patients. They go from being pasty, pale and unwell looking to being pink and well perfused.
Well, that sounds like a definite improvement then. Thank you so much, Mark. And do any of our other panelists want to add to that?
I'll just sort of quickly add that I think a couple of other people have said it, but I'll reiterate one of the wonderful things about medical cannabis. You may be aiming at treating somebody's anxiety or insomnia, for which it's fantastic, by the way, and pain relief, but they come back with all sorts of other wonderful benefits. So yes, if you've slept really well, life does feel a lot better the next day. So that's a good start. But skin and digestive issues, so people who've had Crohn's or inflammatory bowel problems, people who've had acne, even my teenage daughter would testify. You have CBD, it can make a huge difference. Skin can be improved. So there's a positive, dare I call them, side effects, because this one plant or a group of plants can have so many beneficial effects, which is rather different to a lot of our prescriptive medicines otherwise. So.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Yeah, I certainly get feedback from patients who email us talking about actually the cannabis enabling them to come off of some of their prescription drugs. Is that something that you see in your practice?
I think we'd all say a big yes to that. It is a phased approach. And obviously, when you're counselling, I would echo what was said before, there's a go slow approach. So everything is done with counselling and with the GP. Although we might be GPs, we are still communicating. And very much one of the MDT things that we need to be sure that patient is being well supported by their own GP and other specialists and team, particularly mental health things, etc. So when we're really adding in another medicine in complement, not hopefully to then wean down on harmful medicines that they may be, or just have fewer. So it's not so much polypharmacy.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, I think, Charlotte, you've already touched on this, but would you say that there are benefits of being a GP prescriber of medical cannabis as opposed to a specialist consultant?
I don't want to tread on any of my toes because I know there's wonderful specialists out there, but we are holistic practitioners. We're trained to, and we also, because of the huge and diverse variety of things that we see on a daily basis, we are very upskilled in such a multitude of different conditions. And I think our approach is usually quite holistic. You'll hear a lot about social prescribing, about lifestyle medicine and mindfulness. I'm loving to hear all these words used by my colleagues because those were not things we were taught about in the 80s. I am an 80s trained doctor. Hopefully the new generation will start to have much better education and all these integrative approaches. And if there's a positive that's come out of COVID, we've all had time to sort of stop and reflect and work out what's important in our health and wellness. Medical cannabis goes into the realm of wellness. You are really adding value to people's lives. They now, because they've slept, because they have less pain, because their relationships are better, because an autistic or ADHD person communicates more, less social avoidance, they will actually go out, they will get exercise, they will meet other people, they will take their dog for a walk when perhaps they didn't. So there's so many other knock-on added benefits of let me just call it wellness.
Thank you. Leon, I see you nodding away. Do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, I largely mirror what Charlotte just said in terms of, obviously, that I'm sort of an advocate for wider GP prescribing. And that's because it just seems to fit so perfectly into what we do as an additional tool. It might not be right for everyone, but what a wonderful thing to have up your sleeve if you need it. And I just can't understand why it's not being allowed. And actually, I think when I look at a lot of the specialists in the clinics, that really they're taking on the role of a GP, but without the necessarily the experience. And I'm sure that some of them are excellent in their own right. And again, I don't want to dismiss our specialist colleagues, but I find it slightly mind-boggling that that's sort of the situation that we have here, and it just seems to be unique, really, in terms of how we've approached it here. And I really struggle in my NHS work with managing some of these types of conditions, and I think most of us within our NHS practice can relate to that feeling of just thinking, oh, really, is this all we can do today for you? Or wait a few more months for the pain clinic referral to come through. But often that pain clinic referral will be, another opioid or a gabapentinoid or a spinal injection that might not work. And then, it can take over a year to be seen in some of these clinics. So we've got very little room for maneuver sometimes. And I also think, there's areas like palliative care where, why are we denying some patients this treatment in a time towards the end of their lives where it can really transform their last few years or days of their life. And I just can't understand why it hasn't been more widely accepted, or why we can't just find a place for it, or even as a small study or a friendly CCG that might be open to running some kind of pilot scheme, because I'm just confident that the results will be beneficial for patients and for doctors. It's just
as you know, we've seen amazing results already through Project 2021. One of the key results has been around quality of life, and it's seeing a huge increase in patients' quality of life after only 3 months of them being on medical cannabis treatment. So yeah, the real world evidence certainly is there, as we've already talked about. It's just very difficult to get policy change to enable all these people to really be helped like we know they could be. I'd love to talk a bit about the stigma, because that is a key problem, it feels like, especially in the UK, that is a barrier to enabling NHS prescriptions at the moment, and to getting people to take stock that medical cannabis is actually legal as well. I'd love to hear from Harrison, move it back to you, to ask if you encountered any pushback or raised eyebrows from colleagues and peers as you decided to become a prescriber.
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, I think I tried to invite some colleagues for this event yesterday, and one of them called me a recreational drug dealer, and it's so it is, you still get that mindset, that negative mindset from people, and I think it's all these preconceptions and negative media about cannabis where that have grown over the years can still affect how we behave and how we act. But in my mind, that the reason I'm doing this is because I want to make patients better. I want to give them options. I'm not prescribing it for myself, but if I do need it at some point in time, I'm sure I would be like, if I went to my GP, I'd say, doctor, what's the best option for me? So yes, I'm still experiencing it, even in my circle of close friends and even family members. But I know I'm doing something that overall, eventually, when there's enough education and awareness out there, people will come around to it and they'll see the benefit of it, and hopefully there'll be a change in a positive way. So yes.
Thank you. I feel like we're all here fighting the cause together, aren't we? Thank you so much. Mark, can I hand over to you and ask how the stigma compares in Jersey, and whether you face any pushback yourself when you became a prescriber?
About a year ago, there were GPs who were really quite unhappy with the whole situation. And some of them have transformed from that stand to actually referring patients to us. It's been a complete transformation, because they witness patients who they're not winning with, and they go to the cannabis clinic and then they come back and see their GP, and they've reduced their opiates and they reduced their SSRIs, and they're better. And actually seeing that in the patients who you've been pulling your hair out for several years, maybe trying to make them better, is transformational in terms of attitude change.
So would you say, with that in mind, that it's like people talking to each other and it's so spreading by word of mouth?
It's patients talking to GPs. It's not GPs talking to GPs. The patients come back and the GPs can see that they're a different person.
Yeah, so that just speaks for itself. That's incredible. Thank you. Yeah, Charlotte, I can see you nodding away. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was also going to add, and I think Mark would, it is a small community and there are advantages and disadvantages, but people do talk to each other, funnily enough, and you'll often get shared relatives, or the word of mouth goes out when people see such a transformation in somebody who's really struggled for very many years. And then people go, well, wow, what is it that you're doing differently? So that, word of mouth is very, very important. And it's also, I just would encourage all GPs to open the conversation in very open terms. For instance, let me take it from a completely different subject. When you talk to a lady about menopause, it's perfectly acceptable to say, well, what other things have you tried, which will include herbal things, which will include also, and we openly have that conversation as a GP, but we need to open that conversation without stigma to our patients and say, has there been anything else? Maybe even just say, well, I know that cannabis is technically illegal at the moment, but maybe have you tried it? We haven't been trained to ask that question in a nice open way. It's been the illicit. Do you take any illegal drugs? Or that's what we're sort of trained to say. Well, so we just need to open the conversation, and you'd be amazed how many of our patients are self-medicating.
I think you raise a really valuable point there, Charlotte, around there being a real difference between recreational cannabis and medical cannabis. So yeah, that's something definitely that we should all bear in mind. Harrison, I'd love to come back to you and ask, what have you found most challenging about being a medical cannabis prescriber as a GP?
First, a steep learning curve, and it felt like learning a new language, in my opinion, especially since I've only been doing it for about 9 months. So I've had to take on quite a lot, in that time, but I've felt quite supported. And like I said, the team at My Access Clinics has been quite helpful too. It also has its own share of challenging patients. You still have patients who can be very demanding and very pushy and kind of say, oh, they know a lot more about medicinal cannabis than you, who is a clinician. But I've had to learn how to navigate that and learn the language of how to handle such patients in that situation. But so yeah, there've been so many challenges, but I think at the end of the day, it's one of the few consultations where at least by the time I finish, more than 90% of the patient would report that they're having positive effects. I don't think I get that kind of feedback from my routine GP job. So yeah, it's quite enjoyable and rewarding on its own. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. That's really good to hear that it feels rewarding. I think that's really important for us to remember. Great. Okay, so how would you go about getting other doctors interested in prescribing medical cannabis? Big question. Mark, can I turn to you first? How would you go about getting other doctors interested?
Part of it is just letting them see the patients who are getting better, so that they understand that this is something that's worthwhile doing. And then it's just being open and talking about it.
Being open is absolutely key, and yeah, so underestimated just how much stigma is still out there Leon, have you got any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I mean, meeting patients for me has probably been the biggest shift in attitude, and that was really my route into this. It's amazing how some people respond to it, and you just hear some patients stand out more than others as well in terms of how their lives have been turned around, which is really powerful. I think it is an issue with GP prescribing. It's difficult, and the main reason is that unless you're prepared in the UK to kind of start working privately as a GP, and let's not forget most GPs don't work privately in this country, it's really hard. I mean, it's impossible through the NHS to be prescribing off-license medicines, cannabis-based medicines. So, in order to incentivize a GP to join some of the private clinics, it's got to be, I mean, there are loads of GPs out there like Harrison, unfortunately, who are sort of prepared to learn new skills and just sort of, go in at the deep end in that sense. But I'm sure there are quite a few out there if we get the word out. That's really the key thing. It's just that a lot of people don't know about it, and then if they learn a little about it, it's maybe a bit off-putting because of the regulations. But I'll always come back to education and these types of questions, because the more you know, the more prepared you are to get involved and be actively involved in this space. So the regulation doesn't make it easy, but it can be done as clearly as we can see today. So sorry, quite a long answer.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think it's all great points.
And I think the more you learn in this space, you realise there's actually loads of doctors out there and more coming in. It's a growing community and a growing interest amongst clinicians, which is great. So it does feel like the start of something, and it's almost, there's something in the challenge of it as well, I think, that spurs me on. It just feels like really kind of a new part of medicine, and I think we've also got the opportunity to shape it in a way that, in a really good, responsible way, if we could just get the right minds together and the right people. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Very well said. Sorry, Charlotte.
Yeah, I was just going to echo, very, very well said. And just as a quick thing, if it all seems a little bit scary, you get to this point of the talks and you think where to go from here. Just learn about CBD. Get Dani's book. Read about CBD and the full spectrum and the whole plant, because that is legal. It's easy. Your teenagers can have it. Anybody can have it, really. There's the few tiny little things with full spectrum, elite sports people or people who have the drug testing for work, those sorts of things. You have to counsel them, but just learn about CBD and start recommending it with knowledge and see the difference. Ask them to come back in a month and see the difference.
I'm just going to add one little thing onto that, Charlotte. We've just about to publish a new project through the MCCS where we've looked at all the brands available in the UK, and they've all been product tested and analysed just to check they're hitting certain criteria. It's not to divide the industry at all. It's just to give doctors a little bit more confidence in saying, look, I'm not saying this is going to cure anything, but this list here is kind of hitting all the right standards, because it is a bit of a minefield sometimes for patients and doctors. It's a funny conversation at times.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to have a look at the Q&A now and see what people have been putting in there. I can see the first link is from Vlad, and it references some recent research around cannabis being used to treat COVID symptoms and long COVID. I wonder if any of the panelists here have any thoughts on that research that's coming out at the moment.
I think the strongest. Funny enough, I was reading about this the other day, so I'm going to pitch in. I think the strongest evidence at the moment is around the cytokine storm and the CBD basically suppressing a very over-exaggerated immune response, which has been, unfortunately, a big reason why people succumb to COVID. So there's quite interesting preclinical work in that sense. It's certainly not going to be a cure for COVID, but there's an interesting application for this cytokine storm. I think that's, from my experience, where most of the research interest still is focused on.
Brilliant, thank you, Leon. The next question asks, is there any plan to research or produce prescribing guidance for topical cannabis use for chronic pain in the UK?
Not that I know of. And also the cosmetic industry has their own. So the oral CBD tinctures and vapes and so on are under novel food regulations. But to my knowledge, the creams and balms and things fall under a slightly different regulation. So they're not, anything that's available on the internet or on the high street won't be classed as a medicine. So that's probably holding back some of these types of studies.
Yeah, thank you. Next question is from Sierra. She says, first question is, what has triggered experience? What has your experience been with cannabis for TMJ disorders, in particular for TMD triggered migraines? She's asking for your thoughts on THC versus the CBD ratio and species, so whether indica or sativa make any difference.
Where's Dani?
Yeah,
she would have seen some of them. Have any of you guys seen anyone with this? What?
No experience with temporomandibular joint issues, but in patients with migraine, quite a lot of them say that a balanced thing really helps.
Yeah, I would agree there as well. And because we usually, which is a big difference with, and something you'll learn when you do the training, the big difference between street use and people trying things, that's high THC, and it doesn't have the balance and all the wonderful benefits of CBD. So you start with CBD to begin with, and you add in smaller amounts of THC. And it has had beneficial effects. But often when you manage sleep and anxiety and a lot of the triggers to migrainous attacks and all sorts of muscular tension, low back pain, all sorts of muscular tension, because THC has that lovely antispasmodic effect, and you get a really good deep sleep with restful, just full proper deep sleep. That helps so many conditions. And that's when we start slowly, that's usually the first thing we'll notice, and then a lot of the other things follow.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And Sierra's second question asks if anyone here has come across any patients with cannabis hypermesis syndrome. Sorry if I'm not saying that right. She asks, is this a rare adverse event only seen in long-term high-intensity users or in certain subgroups?
It's hyperemesis. And I've not seen a single patient with it. Okay.
And Charlotte, you haven't either?
No, and my reading on it in the studies of case studies, it's high street use and chronic high street use unbalanced with CBD, and probably way too much for that individual person's cannabinoid tone. And that's something that's so wonderful about this medicine, is that every single individual is different. And you are doing a bespoke treatment for that patient. You really get to know them, and starting slowly. It's not like conventional medicine where an adult dose of this many kilograms, you give this dose. It's very, very different. There's a lot of art to it. Professor Michael Barnes is wonderful in his training, but he's quite right. You really do tailor the treatment for the patient, and then keep reviewing, and as time passes, the treatment often changes, often gets less in time. You get to a maintenance level once you've got someone nice and stabilized. So yes, it's a very bespoke medicine, and I personally rather like that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So the next question is from a pharmacist, goes by the name Halo, great name. And Halo asks what role we see the pharmacy is having within medical cannabis context. I mean, certainly from our perspective at Drug Science, our dealings with pharmacies are that they are the ones dispensing the medicines and sending the medicines by courier direct to the patient, which is actually something I realize we haven't mentioned at this point, but I think it's important to say that patients don't have to go into pharmacies in person to collect their medicines. They get couriered by post, and that makes it much easier for patients to access the medicines. Currently, I can speak for Project 2021. We deal with 2 pharmacies that serve all of our formulary products, and they are called Dispensary Green and Rockshaw, also known as CBPM Access. I don't know if anyone of our panelists wants to add anything about pharmacies before we move on.
My view is that this is an underdeveloped area, and we do have pharmacists within the MCCS, but I think we need to have more of a focus on the needs of pharmacists, particularly because they field a lot of questions from general public, especially on CBD. There's quite a few drug interactions that just need to be known about, like cytochrome P450 and various things that CBD can react with. But I suspect in time, pharmacists will have more of a role in this sector as it becomes perhaps more mainstream. So I think we need to focus a bit more on pharmacists, actually, in the same way we do with GPs. Sort of see them almost as part of the same conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Leon. It's a good point. Okay, I'll move on to the next question from Murtadza. They ask, most of the CBD in the UK is hemp derived. Are there benefits from CBD from either sativa or indica strains? I know this is a bit of a debatable one. Charlotte, I can see you doing this. What are your thoughts on the strains?
Very quickly, because it is getting late. Yes, do lots of learning and read some more. CBD it's not just one thing. Okay, there are chemical isolates which are just single CBD, so that's good for the people who've got need drug testing or sports people. But the whole plant has got so many other things, particularly things called terpenes. Now, we all know about lavender oil and essential oils. We know that some are calming and citrus oils are quite uplifting. Well, cannabis plant is really no different. And there are so many different varieties and subspecies which have, and a lot of it is all these other smaller things. It's not just CBD or THC. There's about 100 and something cannabinoids, minor ones, that we're learning more about. Wonderful stuff coming out of Israel, the research, and across the world. And the terpenes can have all sorts of beneficial things. So the more the products are developing, the more we learn about the terpene profile. So there's the more sedating and calming types, and then there's the more energizing types. It sounds clear as mud, but yes, it's a developing field. Yeah, so there are more sedating types and more energizing types.
Thank you, Charlotte. That sounds like a really balanced answer. So thank you very much for that. Next question is from Vlad. He asks, is cannabis with all its complex biopharmacology and biochemistry going to be introduced into the British pharmacopoeia? Again, not very good at my pronunciation this evening. Apologies. Wouldn't this simplify prescribing it? Any thoughts?
To be in the British Pharmacopoeia, and then it was all removed. It was removed in the 1920s, when they banned it, and before that, lots of the British Pharmacopoeia was full of cannabis-derived medicines.
I think we're now quite all of us used to referring to the BNF, and obviously, I mean, it's largely set up for licensed medicines, so you'll find Epidiolex and Sativex in there, but these botanical medicines haven't been through the same types of studies, if you like, and trials and so on. So you can't recommend one particular dose for one particular condition, and that's really the issue there. So it's all off license or off label.
Okay, thank you. Final question from the Q&A is good efficacy for acne was mentioned. Is it a topical or an oral product that is used? And are there any age limitations for prescribing cannabis? So two different questions there. Who would like to take the one on acne?
I'll do the one on acne. It's really anecdotal, actually, although I'm sure there are other studies out there. The skin, I think a lot of it is a little bit like the migraine question. Teenagers have a lot of complex hormonal things and then life stressors, etc. And because CBD has this marvelous sort of holistic approach, I think it helps in lots of different directions. But yes, it does seem to be, I'm not aware of THC necessarily, and of course we wouldn't be advocating that in younger people. So CBD, yes, it's worth a try, is what I would suggest.
Brilliant, thank you so much.
And the question, sorry, was more by mouth. So there are tinctures and then there's capsules. I think skin products, it may have different carrier things. So I would recommend the sprays, oils, or capsules.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of interesting research going on in dermatology and cannabinoids, patches, new delivery methods. It's an area really ripe for research, and I think we're going to see some really good products coming through in the future.
Brilliant, thank you. And who would like to take the question around age limitations for prescribing medical cannabis?
Well, I mean, what are the like My Access Clinic? What's their policy, Harrison?
I think the less than, is it 25? There's some restrictions about prescribing, but some of the consultants still go ahead and prescribe after assessing the patient. So it's based on need, and I think there's also a restriction about not prescribing at less than 18. So there's some age restrictions for the patients, but like I said, it's always on a case-by-case basis where the consultant who is initiating it would review the case and feel if the benefits compared with the risk is higher, then they can still go ahead and prescribe. And I think it's more about the brain still maturing and developing, and there's no the research is not enough on the effect of cannabis on the developing brain. So that's why that caution is there, basically.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I'm conscious that we're kind of coming into the end of the evening. I've got a couple more questions just to kind of round us off. First off, I'd love to know what are your predictions and hopes for medical cannabis prescribing in the UK for 2022? With us being in January, it'd be great to know what you think is going to happen over the next year. Harrison, can I keep with you? What do you think?
Well, I'm hoping that GPs would be allowed to prescribe it. I think maybe 2022 will be a bit ambitious for us, but I think with enough education and awareness, we can hopefully move forward in towards achieving that.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Well, yes, my hope would be I'm kept reasonably busy with my Guernsey and Jersey work, but obviously the commute can be a bit onerous from the family life side of things. So, yes, it would be nice, even if it's a small involvement, to be able to share the experience I've had already and add value to patients and join a clinic with like-minded people. Yeah, that would be nice to do a bit of both. I like a portfolio career.
Brilliant. And Mark, what are your thoughts for the next year?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to grow steadily in the UK. I think Jersey's probably reached saturation, and it's not going to grow very much more unless the public health system decides it's going to take up the baton and provide it to everybody without having to pay for it.
Yes, we really do need to try and tackle this issue around NHS funding for medical cannabis as a priority. And this is my final question, actually. And Leon, if I could start with you, that would be great. I want to know, how do you think NHS funding of medical cannabis might change the face of healthcare in the UK?
If it was NHS funded?
Yeah, if we could get
I mean, that's
prescriptions issued.
Yeah, I mean, that is a long way off, if I'm honest, but it's ultimately what we need in my opinion. What would it do? I think it would improve some of the big problems we've got in primary care in terms of prescribing rates and repeat attendances and referrals to secondary care, and potentially even less hospital admissions. I mean, it could have really significant impacts across the board, I believe, and cost savings, of course, for the NHS. That's really it in a nutshell from me.
Yeah, I would echo that, and possibly even in the interim, if patients who are already established within the clinics, who've made such improvements and differences in their medical condition, if there could be some form of bursary or subsidy or something for some patients who, I mean, for instance, so many younger people who've had disabling autism, ADHD, anxiety, and now they're transformed, but it's very difficult for them to carry on taking a private prescription because it is expensive. Let's keep it simple. So yeah, it would be nice to have some sort of bursary subsidies where patients who are established and really noticing the differences could have some help to keep going.
Brilliant, thank you. Any thoughts from you, Mark or Harrison?
I completely agree. I think for me, when I'm doing the follow-ups, one important aspect is the price of the medication, and you find patients say, I can't afford to take this and I can't afford to take that. So I have to adjust the medication to sort of fit their budget. And, in my opinion, it takes away from the experience of prescribing, in the sense that the patients keep asking me, how much does this cost and how much does that cost? And I don't know anything about that. So if there was some sort of funding, or some bursary that can take that challenge away from the patients, and then they can just focus on getting their medication and getting better, it will make things a lot better overall. That's my opinion.
I think for me, Jersey is very different to the UK, and in the UK, street cannabis is relatively inexpensive. So medical cannabis is more expensive, whereas in Jersey, because it's an island, because it's difficult to import illegal things, street cannabis is really expensive, and the medicinal cannabis is less expensive. So it's a slightly strange situation here, but we haven't got things like Project 2021, which would make an enormous benefit to patients who are struggling to pay for their cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw an article published in the last couple of weeks online that said that the average cost per gram in the UK is, I think, between 10 and 15 pounds. And really, we're seeing the price of medical cannabis come down so significantly over the last couple of years, helped by initiatives such as Project 2021, which has brought down the price and meant that now medical cannabis is on par cost-wise with the illicit market. I think the key issue there to raise is that, of course, patients still have to pay for their own consultations because we're dealing with the private healthcare system. So that it continues to be an issue when it comes to cost. Before we go, quick question from Anna, one of our audience, who asks: is there any evidence on the use of CBD for migraine with aura specifically? Not sure.
Not sure. Have a look on PubMed. There'll be something out there for it.
That's true.
I know it's a bit of a cop out, but there will be studies out there. I don't know how strong the evidence is, but I'm sure anecdotally there's lots of interesting reports on that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I would
that's a
say
bit of a cop-out, but
I would also say Canadian and Californian research, they're way ahead of us in the UK. So yeah, you'll probably find more from over the pond than here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, guys. Then quickly, before we go, I want to just do a poll for everyone watching, asking, are you interested in becoming a prescriber of medical cannabis? If we just spend 10 seconds answering yes, no, not sure, that would be excellent. Okay, and I'll leave it there. And we've got definitely 75% of people saying yes. So that's fantastic. Very happy with that. That's good. So I want to just say a huge thank you to all of our wonderful speakers this evening. So thank you to Harrison, Leon, Charlotte, Mark, the other Mark, who is in Australia, of course, and Dani, who had to leave a little earlier, but all incredible speakers and incredible talks we've heard this evening. Very, very grateful for your time indeed. Before we go, I'd like to let all of our audience know that Drug Science will be hosting another virtual conference, which should be on the 23rd of March, and we'll be talking about cannabis science and beyond. So please save the date of the 23rd of March. There'll be more details coming soon. Make sure that you have signed up to the Drug Science and the Project 2021 newsletters in order to be the first to hear about that being published, which will be in the next few weeks. So yes, thank you all very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening. Good night.